Kiddos, keep your minds clean. This video is for adults only. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back. Glad you are here. I feel like I'm talking a little loud tonight. So glad you're here. My name's Gavin. This is my channel. This is a true crime channel. We like to talk about all things true crime. We like to cut through the sensationalism of true crime, cut past the fluff, and get into the nitty gritty. And tonight is part 2 of a 3-part special series that we're doing with Anna Sonoda. I'm really grateful that she has prepared and has come back to talk about predators and grooming and what we as parents and grandparents and civic leaders and people with and guardians and people with children in our lives that we want to protect. She's coming to teach us how we can do that. So if you have not seen the first part, I'll put a link down below. I think I already did, but if I haven't, I'll put a link down below to part 1. And with that, I would like to welcome Anna. Anna, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Gavin and audience members. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Glad you're here. Let's see. Last time you were here, I mean, we were talking before we went on air. We spent some time on this. It was like almost an hour and 45 minutes talking
Yeah.
about groomers, predators who are preparing to hunt and go after children specifically. Today we're talking about one of the I guess components of that, which is access, right? The would-be predators' access to our children. We're getting into the nitty-gritty on this one. Am I correct?
You are correct. If you were joining us last week, you noticed that I talked a lot about the gas model, this idea that predators run on gas, grooming, access, and space. So tonight we're going to do a deep dive into access. Where do predators find available families and children? And what comes with the unique access based on your title or your role in a family or in a community or in a job or position?
All right. So why don't we go ahead and jump? Oh, I should say my moderators, I've talked with our lead mod, Autumn. We have a little private Slack channel. They're going to kind of curate the comments and questions. So as we go along, I'll check in on Slack from time to time, see if there are any questions that are coming in. Maybe at, some moment in the presentation, we can take a little break and address some of the questions that people have. That was one of the things last time. I just, with all the toggles and switches and buttons and levers, I couldn't do it last time. But we're going to do our best to bring in our viewer questions as well. All right, so should we go ahead and hop in?
Yeah, let's hop in. So, as we talked about just a few moments ago, this idea that there's a fuel that predators lean on. And through my research, and for those of you who are joining us just for the first time, my name's Anna Sonoda. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a former therapist to convicted sex offenders. And what I realized in those sessions, working for several years with convicted sex offenders, was that the ramp up to sexual abuse was a predictable, observable, intentional process. So, one of the things that I think is important for us to discuss tonight is access. So, you can groom all you want, but if you don't have access to a child or access to children and families, then the likelihood of you abusing a family diminishes. So this is a really important factor as we're thinking about this issue as a whole. So we can go to the next slide, please, Gavin.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about access, we need to keep in mind that not all access is created equal. If I'm a family member to somebody with children, then my access might be limited to that family if I live across the country. Or alternatively, if I'm a coach for a youth team, I may have great access because I teach a travel league or I teach a group of children who have committed their interest and their willingness to be part of my team. And so each of these are unique access points. So, one of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight is what are the unique risk factors of each of these environments? And then what's our checklist? Because I'm a parent of five, I am part of a community, I live in a neighborhood. I want to be able to spend time in youth serving environments, whether it's a religious setting or whether it's an activity. And so my reputation as an adult also needs to be protected. Just as the same time as we're protecting children, we also need to be looking out for the reputation of adults who work in youth serving spaces or individuals that we lean on in our school systems, in our religious communities, etc. So if we go to the next slide, you'll
Real quick,
notice,
can I ask a quick question, or can I
of
interject
course.
real quick? So something came to mind as you were talking about that. This week I had on the channel Elizabeth Jones from Hillbilly Crime. Um, and I'm not speaking out of school here. She's really open about this, but Elizabeth is a single mom, and she raised boys, and to her children's coach was like she was leaning on him to be that father figure in
Mhm,
their lives, right? So even though
mhm.
he's not a member of the family per se, the access that he had to those kids, especially when the grown adult in the family was going, I want you to be part of the fostering and the raising and the, shaping and molding of my child. He has way more access than even like a stepbrother or somebody who lives across town, right? That's what you're saying. We don't, just because they're a member of the family, somebody's a member of family doesn't mean that they have more access, and then the opposite is true, that just because somebody's not a member of the family, they don't have less access. Yes?
Absolutely. And if I made that mistake or misstatement, I'm
No, no,
really
no.
glad that you brought it up so I can correct it
No,
because
you didn't make a
you're
mistake. I just
absolutely
want to make
right.
sure I understand you. I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
that depending on my proximity, my decisions as a parent to allow access or deny access or limit access, um, that individual may benefit. And, as we've talked about before, we don't know who are predators and who are not. And we have to rely on our keen observation skills, not only our observational skills of the individuals themselves, but also of our children. How are they responding to this time with the person? What is their behavior like? Most people do not want to harm children. That's the good news. But the other part of that is that the people who do, their behavior is different than an adult who does not want to harm a child. They're going to opt to spend probably less time with the children. If I'm throwing a party at my house, for example, the adult who's in the basement hanging out with the children, preferring the company of children, might make me more curious. Am I calling that person a predator? No, but it is of note to me when an adult prefers the company of children to the company of their peers. Um,
Hmm.
I think one of the pieces that I think is also really important is we're not talking about one behavioral cue. We're talking about a pattern of behaviors. We're talking about a string of observations because predators need to test the barriers. You remember that movie Jurassic Park,
Yeah.
Gavin.
Yeah.
So what is the critical thing that the dinosaurs do in Jurassic Park?
They touch the electrical fences to check them.
That's right. They got to test the fences.
Yeah.
Predators are the same. They've got to check what are the weaknesses within this fence and where is it really strong and upholding. So children often don't even have awareness sometimes that grooming is taking place or that a predator is potentially trying to test them. They simply know that something feels weird or somebody's really working hard to be their friend or they're offering them things that were otherwise confusing or most adults wouldn't permit or allow. So, what we're looking for and what I'm asking of everybody who's watching today is we have to be keen observers. You may have heard of the term mandated reporters.
Hmm.
These are individuals in mental health, individuals who work in school systems, individuals who work in religious settings are mandated reporters. What I'd like to see happen is that we all become mandated observers so that we're trying to recognize what are the things that we need to look for and then spot them so that we can act upon those things in a timely manner.
Um, oh man, no, I just my thought completely left me. But as you were saying that, the whole idea of like I can think back in my life at times like when I was a kid in high school, for example, I did have a teacher that really enjoyed coming to our parties. Like that's odd, right? Like as a 30-year-old, I would not go and hang out with high school kids, right? And
Right?
you know, as you're saying these kinds of things, like at the time I was like, well, isn't he so cool? He comes and hangs out
He's
with us.
cool.
And I haven't even
Yeah.
thought about it for 35 years until you mentioned that. Like, oh my goodness, could he have been one that was testing those boundaries?
Yeah. And
Wow.
and we may not always know, right? Some of the frustration with the conversations I have with adults in the community is, well, I want a guarantee. And I can't give you that guarantee, but what I can do is I can equip you, I can empower you, I can encourage you to spot the things that look odd or look weird or look strange, so that you can do
Oh,
something about it.
sorry. I just,
What I
there we go.
No worries. What I want people to think about is you may have heard of the term stranger danger. What I'd like you to think about moving forward after this evening is strange behavior. So I'm looking for the adult who's working with one of my children, tutoring, coaching, religious mentor, etc. I'm looking for the one that stands out as wanting all the things that we talked about last week with grooming: favoritism, flattery, those ideas, those concepts that the individual is going to be sweet, they're going to be cool, they're going to be attractive to the children themselves so that they can more easily target them. And children are not equipped always to recognize what those things are, and they don't have the life knowledge that Gavin, you and I have to recognize that manipulation is something that can be done a bit by a bit by a bit. Sometimes when I teach, I talk about this idea like phyllo dough. Do you ever bake,
Philo.
Gavin?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like if you like baklava or spanakopita, it's used a lot in Greek cooking.
Yes.
But phyllo dough, if you were to just take a sheet of phyllo dough, you could almost see through it. It's almost translucent. But it's when you get all the layers together that it gives you a really nice crunch when you're eating or cooking or baking.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about these concepts, I want you to think about that as well. That on their own, they might seem like nothing, but then when you stack it up and you think, oh, well, in hindsight, this was kind of strange. Just like you were talking about with your 30-year-old teacher who's coming to teen parties.
Yeah.
That might get your attention today if one
Mm-hmm.
of your children's 30-year-old teachers was coming over to a house to hang out with kids.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's also important to note that I'm not anti mentorship, I'm not anti adults having important roles in the lives of children. But what I don't want to see is this the what I call the seesaw principle. I don't want to see a child relating to an adult on an adult level. So what do I mean by that? I mean that I don't want my child to be adultified. I don't want the adult to be talking about their financial woes, their marital problems, their employment woes, all those things that are the nitty gritty of adulting.
Grown
That's
up
not
issues.
grown up issues,
Yeah.
right? Those are
Yeah.
not things that a child needs to feel burdened with. And likewise, the opposite of that is I don't want the adult to be relating to my child as if they were a peer. So using the same lingo, playing on the same gaming platforms, um, being one of the guys or one of the kids, those are things that are red flags to me as a parent. And I'm hoping through this conversation tonight that we can educate more and more parents that I'm looking for those dynamics. I'm looking for the person who, just like a seesaw, it's either up or it's down. I'm looking for that person who adultifies my child in their relationships or through their mentorship, or that adult who acts more and more like one of the kids rather than one of the adults.
Now, um, when you were working with convicted sex offenders, are these some of the things that they would talk about there? Or, well, I want to know kind of how you got that. Were you asking them directly, how would you go about gaining access to children? Or is this something that they would tell you as you're working with them? I mean, did you get this right from the horse's mouth, is I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah, what I observed in the room in those clinical years was that the same playbook was being repeated. The scenario was different, maybe a stepdaughter and a stepdad, maybe an uncle and a nephew, maybe a pastor and a child, or a coach and a child. But this dynamic played again and again and again. And it was only after I left that work and realized there is a rhythm and a predictable
Hmm.
direction grooming goes in, and these individuals went out of their way to volunteer in child serving environments. They went out of their way to donate their time. When we think about cases, famous cases, we think about people like Dr. Nasser, who volunteered for the Olympic team. He was not being paid, he was not being compensated. He was a volunteer in that job.
Oh, I did not
Did
realize
you know
that.
that?
No, I
Mhm.
didn't realize that.
It was out of the kindness of his heart he was
Oh,
volunteering.
well,
So,
can I ask
yeah,
one more quick question? And I'm sure
of
that the
course.
viewers are like going, Gavin, shut up, let her teach you. But real quick, um, there is there a playbook that they go to, or is this just the natural as people grow up to be predators? They're feeling the feels that the rest of us don't feel, and they're learning, they're testing boundaries, they're learning everything. Is this just the natural place that they end up, or are they studying other people? How do they learn this?
Well, unfortunately, with the advent of the dark web and those being wonderful platforms for pedophilic groups to get together and to share content, share information, share what they're learning. And they even embolden themselves by using those platforms to teach and educate each other. That is one thing that has come with the advent of the proliferation of the internet, etc. What I discovered, because at the time that I was counseling, these were not widespread resources available to individuals who are harming children. What I noticed is that life itself is a wonderful research tool. And these individuals would start grooming in a different setting and then stop. They would get to, maybe stage 2 or stage 3, and then they would stop, or the child would move, or a situation would come up and they would abort the mission, so to speak.
Hmm.
So, one of the things that has taught them is that, because remember what we talked about last week, up to 70% of all convicted sex offenders have up to 9 victims.
Right.
So when we're thinking about these individuals, we're not just thinking about one isolated case that's out on its own. We have to consider that these are serial criminals. These are individuals who've gone out of their way to put themselves in environments with families and children in reach, and then they've used those roles and titles that we'll get into tonight in order to gain assurance of the parents, of the caregivers, and the other individuals that they work with, so that the people who are surrounding them say, no, Danny could never do anything harmful. He's our best volunteer, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So the grooming process has to include the adults who are surrounding that child or the potential targets. If it's multiple children, which the predators I worked with, one of them had a consistent role coaching um, an athletic league, a youth athletic league, and would host sleepovers at their home. Well, what do you think was happening at the sleepovers once all the children fell asleep?
Wow.
Really, really tragic things. But because they had a child of their own, nobody questioned it. Nobody thought that was strange or weird. Obviously, the culture has transitioned a great deal when it comes to sleepovers. I don't know what your family policies are on sleepovers, but
We
that
did
is
no sleepovers.
it's often a hot button item, hot button topic when I talk to people and try to educate parents or receive questions from people. So I think the thing to keep in mind and to realize is that the handbook that they use is is now available to you because now we're talking about grooming as a culture, as a society, internationally. We're even talking about grooming. When you think about the case in the UK about the grooming gangs, we're now starting to open up the channels of conversation around grooming so that we can all be better equipped and more empowered to be able to recognize something so that we can act.
Hey, while we're in question mode and speaking on that very subject, one of my
Mhm.
mods said one question is not only do predators groom the children, but also the family. How does a family become groomed? Can you
Yeah.
tell a little bit more about that?
Of course. So, when we spoke last week, we were talking about the 4 F's of grooming, the sort of grooming formula that became really clear to me once I had my own children and started to watch interactions with adults and my children using that experience I had counseling convicted sex offenders. And the first stage of grooming is flattery. So, now that I'm a parent, I recognize those individuals who are trying to woo me. They're trying to convince me of something. They're trying to gain confidence, my confidence, in whatever role they have in my family's life or my child's life. So, one of the ways that we can recognize that is when that individual is highly complimentary of my child or my family, goes out of their way to say, "Oh, I've never taught an athlete like this before. We've never had a student as talented. I can really see this young musician going places, and I'm so glad that you've brought them to me because I am the ticket to get them to a scholarship, a placement in a
Mm.
wonderful environment in the future, etc." And as a parent, we can all relate to this desire of wanting our children to live the most successful potential that they possess. And many parents in 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 those environments with a potential predator who's feeding you everything you want to hear, right? They're feeding you, "Oh, that scholarship could really be attained if I just had the opportunity to work with your son. Oh, that invitation is going to open up. Let me just work with them a little bit more. Let me work on with them one on one. Why don't you just bring them over to my house and I'll work with them one on one in my home."
What
Because
what what about one of the reasons that we started talking was the Madeline Soto case. Now, this is a case where Stephen Stearns, who is accused of murdering her and abusing her over the course of many years, he's not a coach, he's not a teacher, he's not a priest or pastor, he's not a community member. He is the domestic partner of the mom. I mean, what does that look with those 4 F's, right? That what does that look like in those kinds of cases?
Yeah, that is one of the high risk environments for children is the highest when we think about a child living with two biological parents has the lowest risk of child sexual abuse. Children who are in foster care are 10 times more likely to be sexually abused, but children who live in a household with cohabitating, dating single parent are 15 to 20 times more likely to be sexually abused. So, what is at play here? And actually, if you go to the presentation, I have
Yep.
several slides on single dating parents
All
because
right.
this is a really unique And you can sort of bop around here because the single dating parent is one of the specific questions I got, and I wanted to make sure that we dove into that in a really deep manner. So what we might do is we might just put that on hold so that we
Okay.
can
Yeah.
address
Sounds
it
good. Let's
in
do that.
depth when we get to those slides. That way, I'm
Perfect.
not having to bore the listeners
No, that's great.
with me saying it multiple times. Um, but the brass tacks of tonight is that your role or your title is going to give you privileged access to kids. So what do I mean by that? I mean, anybody, think in terms of who's got access to your family right now: neighbors, family members, doctors, tutors, coaches, teachers, any individual who's working in youth activities or youth entertainment, for example. These are settings in which there are unique risk factors. So if we go to the next slide, we as parents often can feel powerless when up against this subject, and it can feel too daunting to even tackle. But one of the things that we can do is that we have the authority until children are older teens. We have the ability to grant access, limit access, or revoke access to our family and to our children. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, I get to invite people into my home or not. I get to choose what camp my child goes to or doesn't go to. I get to select the school my child goes to. So I'm making decisions at every turn for the best interest of my family and for my child. And one of the things I think it's important for us to remember is we have that and possess that authority, and we don't want to just feel as if we're the recipients of attention or flattery, or that a situation is brewing and we are powerless. On the other hand, we have the ability to pivot, change directions. If there's a coach at a roller skating rink that's being strange, or there's weird behavior, strange behavior, again, that's going to be our focus, then I can find another rolling rink. I can vote with my feet in a way. And one of the things I think would be interesting for your audience to be thinking about is think about a time in the past where you've made a decision to limit access or revoke access because of your child's safety.
Yeah.
This could even apply to things like you know that a family member drinks at meals, so that individual is not allowed to drive your child home after a family gathering because you know they'll have been drinking. It might mean, with an allergy, for example, if a child has a severe allergy, maybe you limit the households that they can visit because you're aware that the cleanliness or the adherence to those sorts of limitations is less stringent than you would like. So, at every turn, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a caring adult, even as teachers, these individuals who we rely on a daily basis, they're making decisions about who should be in this space and who should not be in this space. What are your thoughts, Gavin?
Oh, my thought is that I think that sometimes we don't give ourselves the permission to be the bad guy and say, no, that I'm not going to let that happen with my daughter or my son. Not specific to grooming, but we have a child who has celiac disease. And so gluten is a major thing, right? And so we have given ourselves permission to say, no, we are not going to send her to this place because of the dangers that actually exist there. And I think when it comes to having our spidey senses, or you're calling it being keen observers. It's not something tingling in us. We're being proactive, right? We're observing here. If we observe something, we need to give ourselves permission to be the bad guy and say, not going to happen, even if that means um, going against maybe an accepted societal norm. It I think that might be something that gives us pressure as parents and as caring adults, trusted adults of children, that we don't that we kind of get along, we go along to get along in a lot of different ways, And we can say to ourselves, this audience, you and I, we can say to ourselves, no, I'm completely comfortable being the bad guy here. And the adult can hate me, or the society can hate me, but I'm protecting my child.
Yes. And it's actually a muscle that is useful for our children to witness. Because I don't know about you, Gavin, I'm pretty sure that you and I are both on the same mission to raise young people who can go
Hmm.
out into the world and they can assess for themselves, trusting their gut, trusting their observations, trusting their street smarts, etc., in order to evaluate situations that are good choices and ones that are less good. You know, not every
Yeah.
situation is black and white, but I want them to know, oh, the reason we're not going to this party is because XYZ. The reason you're not going to the sleepover is XYZ. And being open and honest with our children about what led to that decision. Why did I get moved from this team to that team? Why did you choose to move me from this pool complex to this pool complex? Now, it's easy for me to say because I live in a major city in the United States. We have a plethora of options. This becomes a real concern, and I actually think it ties in tremendously to what you just said, Gavin. When you only have one pool in the community, you
Hmm.
only have one church, and everybody's going to that church, but you notice that there's a predatory individual who's showing a lot of interest to your children. They're staring at your child during church. They want to sit really close to them. They want to put their hands on their legs or on their back during services. You don't really know what to do. You feel conflicted. This is an environment that you, as an adult, have selected. It's one that you care about. You have relationships in this setting. It can be extremely challenging to act upon the best interest of our children because
Yeah.
we might have to endure some collateral damage.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I mean, we live in a very rural area. There literally is one pool in town. There's one baseball program. There's one theater program. So you just have to be willing to say, like, for the sake of the safety of my child, I'm not participating in this thing, even though I love this thing, right?
Yeah.
Like our kids
Or
love theater, or what? I would love to hear that.
or you raise a little hell and you gather up everybody else who's observed the same things you have and you bring it to someone who can make decisions that might change who's on staff or how things are handled or policies and say, in today's age in 2025, I really think it's about time we had a policy of two adults for any environment that's youth serving in our church. This is what I'm asking people. This book, this effort, this conversation today is a call to action for adults. Don't just sit passively and think, well, there's nothing I can do about it. We have a predatory person in our environment. Absolutely not. You can do what you have in in your own reach, in your own grasp to try to ameliorate the situation.
I love it. Yeah, don't. Uh, I like that a lot better because the way that I was saying it is like I'm going to protect my child, which means my child will be protected, but I'm going to leave the rest of them to the wolves, right? So, yeah, much better to just, as you say, raise a little hell and don't be bashful about it. I love it.
That's right. And if I've noticed something as a caring adult or as a parent, guess what? I would put money on the fact that somebody else has also noticed it.
I bet you're right.
When we think about these high profile cases, whether it's Nasser or we have too many to choose from. But when we think about these cases, we have to remember that once all the dust settles, you have several people who come out and say, well, I did think that this was odd. I did think this was strange behavior. And what we have to do is we have to shorten that timeline and we have to make ourselves, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when we feel fearful about the community out, you know, any of that collateral damage we were just speaking about, we
Hmm.
have to be the ones to step up, because imagine how challenging it would be for a child to do something that we're not even capable of doing,
Yeah. Yeah. Good
right?
point. Yep.
So
Oh,
let's dive into some of these. So let's start with an easy one. A privileged access role is a neighbor. What makes a neighbor high risk? We've got some ideas here. This person has close proximity to my family. They probably know my routines, our loosely our schedule. They might even be entrusted with a key to my house. I don't know if you live in a community like that, Gavin, but
sure.
there are several communities across this country where, you know, we've got a collection of keys that belong to different neighbors, and in the event of something, you've got permission to go in, etc. These are individuals where we have a shared address, we have a shared philosophy in our community. No matter what neighborhood you live in, oftentimes there is a shared collective identity. This is our street. This is our neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that is a very powerful ethos to lean on, especially if I'm potentially a potential predator who lives in a community with lots of kids. One of the things I might do is build confidence and build assurances with the local families and say, "Oh, I've got all the toys that any kid would ever want in my basement, but I never had kids. I don't have kids, but I'd love your kids to come over to my house and play at my house." Okay, that's curious to me, right? Similar
Mm-hmm.
to this concept you brought up earlier about the 30-year-old teacher coming to the kids' party.
Yeah.
I'm I'm curious. Am I calling that person a predator? No. But we let our guard down with neighbors. Can you think of a neighbor, an element of neighbors or neighborhoods that's unique or that your audience could relate to, Gavin?
Um, well, I'm not sure that I understand the question. Lay
Let
it on
me
me one more
rephrase
time.
it. So, can you think, when imagining the neighborhood that you're a part of right now,
Yeah.
can you share a characteristic of your neighborhood that you think your audience can relate to?
Oh, my neighborhood. Yeah, my neighborhood. We care for one another. Like, like it's known on this block. Ev- Everybody just knows each other and cares for one another and is in each other's homes. Uh, yeah, it's just a very caring place. We've been really blessed that way.
Yes. And there is a need and a desire to keep the tight knitness of a community intact through
Yeah.
service. And one of the things listed there is this idea of reciprocity. So, we like to bake in our family, especially during the summertime when everybody's home and, not much of a rhythm or a schedule. And we might run out of something. The kids are very comfortable nipping across the street, asking for eggs, asking for sugar, flour. We really pride ourselves in our community for being an old school neighborhood,
Hmm.
like kids out on bikes and asking for an egg when you're in a pinch. So, this idea of reciprocity is a wonderful thing. In no way am I against neighborhoods or having close relationship with neighbors, but that's a unique role. When I think about the leader of a church, like a pastor, that person may not have ever seen my home. They may never even cross the threshold of my door, but they know me in a very different way. The risk factors are very different. And when we think about neighbors, we need to know that we're often letting our guard down. And there's often a sense of, come on in, come into my house, come into my apartment, come into my condominium, come into my townhome.
Hmm.
And that's a wonderful thing. But as we talked about the last week, 82% of all child sex abuse happens in two places. Do you remember what they are, Gavin?
I don't. But I'm guessing home is probably the first one, right?
Yeah, the home where the child lives or the home where the
Or
predator lives.
wow.
So we need to be attuned to that. If we go to the next slide, so what's our checklist? as parents, I hate hearing the bad side of the story without some actionable, empowering message. So, what can we do? We can, whenever possible, we can meet in public spaces. We can meet in the front yard. We can meet in the outdoor road. We can, close off the road and turn an indoor in-home party into a street party, right? Maybe not in this heat down here in the South, but some areas right now are very beautiful. Um, when we do have people visiting the homes, even though they are neighbors and they might feel very much like family, we need to make sure that we are closing spaces that are private. So, top of that list, bedrooms and bathrooms. And the importance of that is that most of the predation that I witnessed through the testimony of convicted sex offenders happened in areas around dressing, beds, different levels of consciousness of the child or the targeted child.
Yeah.
So it's not as easy as just saying you can come into my house and the doors open and all doors are open. So let's keep a designated space where we know that when we've got visitors in the house, we're closing off bedrooms and bathrooms.
You
Now,
know,
what is your policy about that, Gavin?
yeah, in our house is a tall house. We have second and third floor, um, and then a basement. So in our home, when we have people over, which is actually pretty frequent, it's first floor only. It's ground floor only.
Yeah,
So there's a half bath on the ground floor that is in a place where we like people can't really sneak into. So yeah, like, and what's really funny is that because of the house that we live in, we live in an old Victorian home, so it's very ornate. People want to wander around, and the answer to that is actually no. Now's not a good time. We haven't cleaned. We'll tell stuff like we're not really prepared to take guests up there. You know, we have a staircase. It's kind of a grand staircase, Tiffany window up a kind of halfway up before it turns,
what?
and people just immediately are drawn to go up the stairs. No, 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 no. We're on the ground floor here, and we've had to enforce that a couple times. So that's kind of our
Yeah.
deal.
And how do you enforce that with people that you care about, with whether it's neighbors or individuals who are by proxy invites? How do you and your family manage that, turning
We
that down? I
we
love what you
simply say
said already.
that's our private place. That's
Nice.
what we do. And on a we've lived in. I mean, this is by far the biggest house we've ever been in. A normal house, there's typically in any house that we've either owned or rented, there's a living room and there's a kitchen and a dining room area, and then there's a hallway that goes back to the bedrooms, right? The, I mean, that is an obvious, I guess, border, right? A place where you can just say, no, no, that's our private. That the West Wing is forbidden. It is forbidden.
I love the way you said that. Yes. So this goes back to the point that we talked about earlier. Parents up to a certain age, I know I'm going to get some pushback on we don't grant access when we're talking about an 18, 19-year-old. I get that. But by and large, we are the ones to grant, limit, or revoke access
Yeah,
for a significant period of time in the lives of our children. And the same is true with our homes. So when it comes to neighbors, we're going to do things like set up a policy. And one of the overall themes of our conversation tonight, if you take away nothing else, remember the concept that it's about who we are, not about who you are. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, we have certain behavioral standards, certain expectations, certain norms because it's who we are. It is not a reflection of who you are that we have this policy. It is simply a reflection of who we are. Similar to this idea that in your house, company doesn't go upstairs or doesn't go past the Tiffany window. It's very important for families, and if you haven't already, this might be a wonderful catalyst to have that kind of conversation where we say, what are our family standards? What are our family standards around safety, around adventure, around reading, around entertainment. You can do this in many pockets. It doesn't have to be ho hum sadness that we're having to think about prevention and protection. And many families already do this already. They may have a policy about before you get on your scooter, you have well fitted shoes on, not your flip flops, not your Crocs, but a well fitted shoe. You have a helmet on your head. Maybe you have some other kind of pads on. And that's a reflection of who you are as a family, not who is playing with you that day or out in the world.
Well,
Does
and
that make
again,
sense?
yeah, and I think what you're talking about is again giving yourself permission to be who you are. One of the things that um, one of the things that used to surprise me a lot. Kimberly and I, we don't drink, and we don't have alcohol in the house. That's and we don't want anybody to bring alcohol into the house. We This is an alcohol free house. Um, and I used to be a little embarrassed about that. No, we won't really have parties at our house because people really can't party at our house because we're kind of tightly wound. We don't want alcohol. But as we've gotten to know people, like there's so many people that have that exact same rule and rules that are similar to that. And
Mhm.
the other thing when we're talking about reputation, for example, if the kids have friends over, one of the reasons I don't want them on the second floor is, number one, I don't want them to go tell their parents that I was alone on the second floor with Mr. Fish. I don't want that to happen. I also don't want to tempt them with things like Kimberly might have jewelry on a tray in the bathroom, or we have the little, savings jar of coins. I don't want that to be a temptation to a little kid. So it's beyond protecting our family. It's also protecting our reputation and protecting the child that might be in our home.
Yes, yes. And we talked last week about the idea that there is a natural risk taking that is developmentally normal and encouraged. And if your child wasn't taking risks, then we would be worried for different reasons. But we don't want to set kids up for failure. We want to set kids up for success. And it's extremely comforting to most children to know exactly what the fences are around a given space or a given community. These are not things that children typically fight. It's actually something that children mostly try to seek out and say,
It's
oh, well,
comforting to them, right?
it's clear.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I think we've really nailed neighbors, and I'm excited to go on to medical professionals. So when we think about the access that a potential medical expert might have in our lives, we have to remember that they have an education that most people don't have. I'm not talking to the doctors listening who are educated in that way, but medical professionals speak another language compared to most adults. If you've ever watched ER or The Pit or any of these medical shows, you'll know that they have a they have a way of communicating with each other that is not always understood by people who have not had that same medical training. Also, individuals who are medical professionals have immediate authority because they wear something that designates them. They
Yes.
often wear a white coat, it's got their name on it, it's got their credentials, they've got a badge, they have tools, they know how to use all those tools. And if I am a, a layperson with no medical knowledge, I am going to defer to the opinion of the most educated person in the room, right?
Yeah.
So if I show up to a pediatric appointment and the pediatrician tells me that my 7-year-old daughter needs a pelvic exam, and that's normed in this community, it's normed in this religion, it's normed in this part of the country, then if I'm uneducated, I might think, well, yeah, this is just what we do. And we need to remember that in the same way that we have authority to grant, limit, or revoke access, we are making a choice when we select a care provider. I'm always harping on this point when I talk to groups or educate that when your pediatrician is checking your child before they put their hands on your child or check their private parts, they should ask the child for their consent, and they should remind the child that the only reason they're able to check their private parts is because a parent or caregiver is sitting in the room and they're looking at it for medical reasons. And if you have a care provider who's not doing that, you either have a choice of educating them about the importance of respecting the child and their consent and their, we're scaffolding here, Gavin. We're
Hmm.
trying to build up an idea in the child that their body is owned by them, and many people are part of keeping them safe and keeping them healthy. And this physician only has permission to do this in the context of this room because a parent or caregiver has given permission to do that. And
Well, and
these
I also find that in the current climate, which is terrific, typically if there's something like that that is going to happen, the medical facility, the doctor will bring in another party so that they are not alone to do that. They want to protect their reputation. If they are a reputable physician, they want to care about their own reputation as well. They don't want anybody to even think that they might be capable of doing something horrific, untoward, whatever you want to call it. And I was thinking when you're talking about different language and physical touching, getting back to Larry Nasser, he, under the auspices of like trying to release tension in a muscle in the back, he was invading these young women's bodies, right? And he was able to just convince them because of his education, his white coat, his language, his standing in the community. And actually, there was another layer to that, and that was the enabling power of the body that these girls were working within. Right? There was a whole bunch of that, but the what crimes he was able to commit because he was able to, I guess, leverage everything that you have here on this list and do it in private is, I mean, when I started following that story and hearing what was going on, it was, I keep using this word, it was horrifying. So yeah, I think as parents, we exactly what you were just saying, building that scaffold of understanding that their body is their body, and it's only in these circumstances that this doctor would do this, and only because I am here. But also, we should be looking out for signs like, why would that doctor's office ever let that happen with just one doctor in the room? That would be a red flag to me.
Mhm. Well, I think when it's sort of similar to what we talked about before with opportunities to switch teams or switch pools. If this is the practicing pediatrician in your community and you live in a very remote part of the United States where access to things like mental health clinicians and other experts or specialists is very, very limited, you may feel as if this is the only option. And in that case, you have a couple of options. You can educate the provider, or you can call out what the provider is doing in order to improve the situation or somehow make a change in the best effort that you can in your community.
Just give
But
yourself permission to do the uncomfortable thing.
yes, yes. And one of the things that is noted here, and you alluded to this, is this idea that there is physical touch, and oftentimes these exchanges are happening one on one. And as your child gets older and older, and HIPAA laws have changed dramatically since we were children, now according to most states in the United States, at the age of 13, a child has the authority in this country uh, to have one-on-one sessions with their physician and only disclose that information to a medical professional, essentially managing their own physical care outside of what their caregiver may give permission to, etc. And this is a sort of a curious reality for us, right? Because in many ways, Congress is acting on behalf of um, emancipated teens, emancipated children who are taking the reins of their lives. And unfortunately, the ripple effect is you may have a predatory medical professional who is working with a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old who's angry at their parents, who's, rejecting some of their parents' teachings or whatnot, because that's very normal and expected and age appropriate. But in the wrong hands, in these one-on-one environments, especially if the caregiver doesn't, this medical provider doesn't do what you just talked about, which is calling in a nurse, calling in a support staff, having another pair of eyes in the room, you could really find yourselves in an incredible power imbalance,
Hmm.
because that doctor has all the tools, knows all the lingo, and can oftentimes convince a patient of doing something that they really don't feel like is in their best interest, or they don't fully understand. How many times have you experienced, maybe going to an appointment or being a witness to somebody else's appointment, and you got out of the appointment and you said, I didn't understand half of what was said. I didn't understand the terms. I don't understand what we're doing next. And hopefully, more and more people feel emboldened to ask those clarifying questions. But many people in those medical settings feel as if, I don't want to ask. I don't want to seem stupid. I don't want to seem ignorant. I don't even know what to ask. So, this is why we need to think about the checklist. So, here we have our risk reduction checklist. Before I hire or select a caregiver, I'm going to review that person. I'm going to read the reviews of that individual. I'm going to make sure that there are no impending allegations against that individual, against the medical board. That's really important. That's at your disposal. I'm going to call ahead and figure out what's expected so that I can prepare myself and that I can prepare my child. Is a pelvic exam expected? Is a full body undressing going to be expected? Because oftentimes, simply knowing what is going to happen can help diffuse stress and set our expectations. Some other things we can do is we can be a keen observer of not only our child, but of the provider during the appointment. If I see any signs of arousal or specific attention giving to a certain part of the body, then I'm going to note that and use my agency as an adult to change course, to interrupt the session, to interrupt the meeting or the appointment, so that I can make a swift response or make a determining action as a result of what I have witnessed in the room. If I'm not in the room, I'm a bit more powerless. So that's why I think it's really important when we think about children at the age of 13, really holding the reins of their physical care and medical care. This is something that we need to be educating them about so that they know if you see signs that somebody's aroused while they're doing an exam on you, it's really important to excuse yourself and go to the bathroom, or excuse yourself and ask, say you're going to be sick, come up with any reason you need to interrupt that session and find a safe adult to tell them right away. Um, I also think it's important to get out of your community when we're doing the reconnaissance about what's normal for medical care. I know there was a pretty well documented case of a pediatrician in a small community that was abusing children. And because everyone in the community, all the families went to this one provider, it was so normed that these things would happen
Oh,
in medical visits.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, the community was all kind of brainwashed into going, "Oh, this is completely normal.
Yes.
He's going to do this. He always has. There's
Yes.
probably some good reason that he does that. He did it to me when I was a kid. Now he's doing it to my daughter, whatever." Yeah, wow,
Yes.
interesting.
That's a really important thing. And I don't know if people have watched there's a new Netflix documentary about a medical provider at the college level, the collegiate athletic level at Ohio State, who was sexually abusing mostly male athletes,
Mhm.
wrestlers, football players, etc. And because you're in a one-on-one setting, you're in college, you think, well, I'm sort of past the age where this would matter. This matters your whole life, right?
Well, and the
This
power
concept of
imbalance in that
walking.
too. The power
Sorry?
imbalance, like maybe you have a
Yes.
scholarship there. You know,
Yes.
you want to get your degree. You're only one semester away from finishing up.
Yes.
Those kinds of things.
Yes.
The power imbalance is just crazy.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Several of the cases that they highlighted were scholarship recipients, and that when we think about the ability to silence survivors, that is a factor, and
Yeah.
it's critically important that we have methods at any agency, whether it's dealing with middle school kids, high school kids, college kids, that we have vehicles for whistleblowers so that they can bring these issues and these predators to light. This individual was able to abuse young men for over 3 decades, and that's uncalled for.
Oh yeah. That's might be the understatement of the live stream. Yeah. Um, wow. How interesting. And I'm sure that there was a level of shame too. I mean, if you're like a big burly wrestler and you've been sexually abused by a medical professional at your college, I'm sure you're not all that enthusiastic about telling people about that either, which is,
Yes,
I
but
mean,
it
is
goes back
sad.
to that idea we talked about a few moments ago about you have to get out of the bubble that you find yourself in your community. On a college campus, you don't have parents around. You don't have,
Right.
mostly, you're not checking in with grandma at the end of the night. So you're
Maybe for the
living in this
first time in their
community.
life too. Like
Yes,
yeah, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 24, 25 years old, you're still a developing person. You're still trying to figure
absolutely.
things out. Yeah.
Absolutely. So medical professionals, that's a really important one. All right. So another access role or access title: coaches, sport staff, sport activity directors. What are some potential risk factors? And chime in because I know I haven't covered all of them. One that I think is important and needs highlighting is the financial the financial strings that a potential coach has over an athlete. Their ability to give you playtime, their ability to bench you, their
Yep.
ability to contact scouts or write a report for you or a reference letter for you is immense. They
Hmm.
hold a tremendous amount of power in that way. Um, these individuals, when we think about coaching, we know that the majority of coaches, no matter the gender of the athlete playing, the majority of coaches are male. It is a very heavily male dominated profession. It may be changing, but it is not changing at a rapid pace. We also know that according to research, the amount of training that coaches and sports staff receive about child sexual abuse, about grooming, about all the things we've been talking about is zero, zero to zero to zero.
Yeah.
When you what does a coaching staff need to know? They need to know how to play the game. They need to know how to manage the scoreboards or the books. They need to manage the parents and the parents' expectations. And oftentimes there is no state, there's no um, uniform statewide um, curriculum that covers this entire country for sports. Now, we do have Safe Sport, which was spurred by all of the Athlete A Olympics tragedy with the gymnasts.
Yeah.
However, Safe Sport is only scratching the surface, and it is not necessarily enforceable. It's not something that that individuals have to come back to. We don't necessarily know what the process of vetting coaches is, for example. I don't know about your community, but at some communities around this country, if you want to coach kids, you can show up and say, I really want to coach kids. Oh, there's nobody else to do the job, or I'm happy to work with whomever else is here. Sure,
Yeah.
I'll do a background check.
Yeah, here in Pennsylvania, it came out of a tragedy in Penn State, um, that anybody who's working with children has to do a series um, of trainings and background checks. But I mean, I've done them. I don't feel like I know any of the information that we have been talking about in our last session and this one. It's not like it's designed to teach me. It's really designed to just kind of filter out the obvious problems. But if you're a predator and your camouflage is so finely honed, I I don't think anything that the state of Pennsylvania does to protect children actually protects from those kinds of people. It might protect from the people that are like convicted felons that are trying to sneak their way back in, then that does happen, but it doesn't. I don't think that it would protect children um, against a very good predator.
Mhm. The other thing that your comments made me think about is ongoing vetting, right? When we think about hiring somebody for a role with children, we typically do a lot of work that is based on history. We do a background check, we check resources, we check references, for example. But then once the person is given the position, what is the ongoing vetting of that individual? Are we checking their
Yeah,
uh, the communication that they're having between player and coach? Are we checking the direct messaging if they're doing any messaging on their devices, etc.? So
yeah,
I think it's incredibly important when we think about coaches. We have touch, we have really close relationships, and oftentimes sports is where parents I've met on the road during book tours, parents go out of their way to say sports was incredibly important for my son, my daughter. It was the thing that got them through when we had trouble in our family or when we had trouble in our household. So, in no way am I saying sports are bad and we shouldn't engage in sports, but we should follow our own checklist. So, here we have some things that we can do as parents. We have got to show up. We've got to introduce ourselves to that coach. We have to make sure that that coach and the surrounding staff, sporting staff, know that we are here. We are an immovable object. So we're going to, whenever possible, be present at practices, be present at games or events, but we're going to be visible. We're not going to be somebody who's like dropping you off at the door, never met the coach, wouldn't be able to pick them out of a lineup. This is really important. Do you know why that's important, Gavin?
oh well, as you were talking about that, I was thinking of my little sister. um so I'm going to answer this the long way around. I'm very sorry, but
I like it.
they're only there are different kinds of people, and my sister is type A in every category. And the thing that people realize about her very quickly, and I'm singing her praises here. There's everything right about this. They realize really quickly is that uh, she will be your best friend or she will be your worst enemy, and she's never going away. And so the reality is, if her children are on your team, she's watching like a hawk, right? And the people who the good coaches, which the vast majority of them are, they use her as a
Yeah.
resource, right? Like, oh my goodness, I
Yes.
love Mrs. Vuki because she's always here. She's always looking after the
Yes.
kids. She's looking after her own kids, the other kids. She will say something loud if I'm ever out of line. She will let me know it. She will let everybody know it. So I will not cross her. I can't remember what your question is at this point, but I was just thinking, like, there are people that aren't like that. One of the closest people
Yeah.
in our lives is a woman who I have to lean in to hear her voice if I'm just standing 2 feet away. She's so soft spoken, and oh, she's wonderful. And if you are that kind of person, I would imagine that you need a Tiffany Vuk in your life. If you can't be that person, then you need to have that person be that person for you. That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
or at least recruit her to join the parents of your sports league.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's in the stands. But I think you bring up a really important description and illustration of this idea that when we are present at whether it's an event at school or an event for sports, we have to look up. We have to get off our phones, get our heads out of a book, and we need to just pay attention. As we talked about a few minutes ago, predators have 70% of predators have usually up to 9 victims. So, and that was the case in every one of the convicted sex offenders I counseled. In no way was the case that brought them into to my office the very first time that they had ever harmed a child. So, what we have to do is we have to get better at just being mandated observers, paying attention. Oh, it may not be your kid. It may not be little Johnny who's being watched closely or observed, but you have the potential to notice, hey, the coach seems to be spending a lot of time with that one player, or that assistant coach keeps going over to the bathrooms with that one player. These are things that you can bring up in a Tiffany style way that draws attention because the other people around are maybe ignoring it, maybe they're too busy watching something else, but the power in showing up is not in just your body being there, but it's also in your eyes being there.
I I yeah, the more eyeballs that are looking out for predators, the more nervous they're going to become, right? The less likely they're going to pounce. I was just thinking of another experience, like, and the reason I bring these up, as I was explaining to you before, is I'm trying to apply what you are teaching us to my life. That's what I'm trying to do. Our I told you last time our son started playing baseball when he was about 10 years old, which is about 3 years or 4 years after other kids started. So he wasn't very good. When when we started, the coach goes to him, "You need to work on ground balls. You and your dad come meet me on Saturday, and we're going to work on ground balls." It wasn't you and I will work on this. It was you and your dad and I will work on this. And then when we got there, he brought his son to be the batter, and to be the exemplar and everything. So those good coaches, I mean, they just stand out, right?
Yeah.
They're about the sport. They're about the success of the child in the sport. Their interest is in that child's ability to play and enjoy the sport. They're not interested in the child beyond that. And you can tell. Like he wouldn't ever put himself in a position where he was one on one with my son. I could tell that about him.
Yes.
He would
Yes.
only do it if others were around. And I think that's like a flashing green neon light.
Yes. And as adults, we have to remember that. We have to be attuned to setting ourselves up for success so that we can help kids, mentor kids, be in environments in youth serving agencies, etc. We rely on those people to also be observing the people who they work with, the people that they work around. So when we're thinking about our checklist as parents, we need to be attuned to, are there any signs or indications that this person is trying to isolate you? We talked a lot last week about this idea that grooming is all about isolating the child from their peer group and then isolating the child from their caregivers or their religious community or whatever it might be that makes them feel shameful and guilty, building upon that with the forbidden fruits,
Yeah.
so that we can get to that fear stage of saying, no one will ever love you. God will never love you if he finds out what you've done, if your parents ever find out, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're thinking about coaching staff, we're thinking about things like, we need good coaches. I
Hmm.
want the world to be filled with good coaches. And I want those good coaches to be on the lookout because they might be near the locker room. They might be able to catch wind to listen to something that's being said by one of the players or by one of the parents. And their voice might actually be more powerful than my voice as simply a parent of a participant.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point.
All right, let's move on to clergy or religious environments, religious staff and volunteers. So, this is probably most similar to medical professionals or physicians. Individuals who are in religious settings often have a a unique presence because they often wear something that distinguishes them as
Hmm.
being closer to God, closer to a deity, separated somehow from the lay individuals who are in the pews or in the space itself. So they physically look different. They have a special status.
Yeah.
These individuals are often called by a higher power to even do the job that they have. So they're given tremendous reverence and respect. And that is often what individuals rely on when we think about these strong religious communities is the built-in communal support and reverence for the leader of that religious faith. When we think about religion, and I would love to hear your thoughts and chime in if you have ideas. But when we think about religion, we think about a seat of safety, or at least we used to. The Catholic Church has obviously had a very visible, um, tragic history of subverting survivors and covering up massive injustices and abuses. But when most people think about their faith life, their religious life, the building, everything affiliated with it is often a seat of safety. There's a
Yeah.
projected sense of protection and safety. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, and historically speaking, that's the way it has always been. In fact, like as you were
Mhm.
saying that, part of it is that we set these things apart as sacred. That's number one, right? These things are sacred to us, and so they're so important to us. But even in the past, there has been a place where, like in religious buildings and places where people could seek physical safety and refuge.
Mhm.
Refuge, not refuse. Refuge, right? So yeah, I mean, it's ingrained into our society just how important these places are, and that's actually why it makes it so egregious, the abuses that happen inside. It's the same thing
Yes.
for anybody who is in a position of authority, a police officer, a firefighter, people that a senator, a judge, people that we lift up onto pedestals. In this case, we are literally doing that on pulpits, right? So, I mean, it is a place where you should be able to feel safe, like it's a
Mhm.
place where you can rest from the cares of the world, that the people are called by a higher power to care for one another.
Mhm.
Also, I was just thinking the clergy has something also similar with medical professions. They have their own language, man. They have the,
Mhm.
I mean, it's a very specific language that many of us don't speak well or understand well. And I've noticed that some clergy are so good at twisting, or at, like, if I'm talking about the bad clergy, like the vast majority is going to be good, right? But those that are the predators in there, they are so good at twisting whatever the religious text or tradition is. They're so good at twisting that into getting somebody to believe that it's God that wants them to do that thing. I mean, we see this in the Micah Miller case, right? She alleges that like that he would get her to do sexual things that she was uncomfortable with by saying that God wants you to be what's the word, subservient to your husband or whatever, right? I mean, these are very skilled people. They have their own language, they have their own education, they're in a place where everybody's guard is down anyway. So I think that maybe the good thing that came out of the Catholic priest scandal is that we all woke up, like,
Mhm.
oh, right, this is happening. It's not just in Catholicism, it's everywhere. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
I also just want to point out on this slide that there is something so unique about religious settings because every single religion says, "Bring me your feeble. bring me your vulnerable, bring me your weak and tired. We will we will bandage you up here. We will caretake you here. We will make you whole again. And when we think about this idea that predators are keen observers of vulnerabilities, we talked about this at great length.
Oh,
This idea that this community goes out of its way. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of sort of listening to sort of prayer logs or requests for prayers, right?
yeah.
Where people's personal, private information is often shared in either small group settings or wider group settings or even just community wide out of love and care and
Yes.
concern for a certain family. And while you and I might look at that and think, oh, isn't that a really special part of having an active faith life? If you're a potential predator, you are getting a tremendous amount of information about financial struggles, familial
Yes.
woes, even specific struggles on the part of the children, because well intentioned parents might go into those environments and say, oh, my son, my daughter's really struggling with XYZ. If I'm a potential predator, I might say, okay, taking note, paying attention,
Wow.
so that I can use this information against that child or against that family at a later time.
I had not even considered that. But yeah, that whole brother and sister Jones need our prayers today because uh their son has passed away, and now little Johnny is without a father, and like all of that comes from a place of caring for little Johnny and for brother and sister Jones, right? But you're right, it gives a tremendous amount of information to those who would be predators about them. The other thing that I'm seeing as a risk factor here is the idea and the doctrine, the dogma that forgiveness is righteousness.
I was
The
just about to bring that one
Oh,
up as well. I'm so glad you did. What do you want to say
man.
about that, Gavin?
Well, no, I mean, I've got a friend who's a documentary filmmaker who is making a film right now that he has stuff out there on him. He and he himself um, was a victim of a scout leader in his scout group in his church. And when he talked to his ecclesiastical leader about it, when he came out after working up the courage to do this as a young man, he was informed by that ecclesiastical leader that scoutmaster had confessed to him that he has repented of it, and now we just need to forgive. And that just blows me away. Number one, okay, forgiveness is a thing that we should all strive for sure. Like I believe that deep in my soul, but it doesn't take away a person's accountability for their criminal actions. It just doesn't, and we have to be okay with that. So yeah, the forgiveness is righteousness. I mean, I know my faith tradition has been guilty um, of keeping people silent based on that doctrine. And I would imagine that it is the same throughout probably almost all religion. I would imagine it's certainly Christianity, Judaism, right? Definitely like Islamism, probably too. Like the big three, it probably is pretty universal there. And man, does it give permission for abusers to abuse.
And what what I am what's opening up for me as I listen to you is this idea that harkens back to what we started with at the beginning of this conversation, with this idea that you have to be willing to face the collateral damage of granting, limiting, or revoking access to your family and your children. And when you think about a religious setting, the the mandate to forgive negates the burden that you are dealing with. It negates your needing to seek justice, because justice is tertiary, secondary, or tertiary to the main objective, which is to forgive. And I do think that is a unique component of all faiths, all religious faiths teaching that we must forgive our brothers and sisters. And that is a really important thing that needs to come out in this conversation, and maybe in the households of people who are listening who are engaged in a faith life. What is our role with forgiveness, and how would we respond to potential grooming or predation if somebody in that role was acting out against the well-being of our family? So when we think about our risk reduction checklist, I'm a big one for what can I do? Empower me, Anna. Give me something I can do, because I think a faith life is incredibly important for the development of children, and it can be a really positive influence on children. So what can we do? We obviously are going to show up. We're going to be keen observers of what's happening, who's it happening with, where is it happening. We're going to allow participation for things that happen in groups, in public spaces, or spaces in which you can have observations. Whenever possible, you're going to avoid one on one settings. You brought up Catholicism a little bit earlier. When we think about the spaces, and we'll get into this a little bit more next week, but what are the spaces that you would feel comfortable being in a one-on-one setting? I know that several of the community cathedrals here in the Atlanta area, when they prepare children for First Communion, for example, the priests who do the confession with the children do it in the cathedral. So every child sits with a priest, and it's all within view of all the other priests and the parents. That's something that is that's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
We need to
Yeah.
be able to observe our children and then observe the individuals who are working with our kids. We can use or encourage our religious settings to use cameras, use camera systems to have a backup. Again, when we think about this issue, we can't just think about this is about catching the predators. No, it's about protecting kids and protecting adults.
Yes.
If you, Mr. Fish, ended up in a setting on the church grounds alone with a child whose mom got a flat tire, and then grandma couldn't make it, it's raining, etc., I'm pretty sure you would feel more comfortable if there were a camera in the large space to be observing your behavior and the child's behavior, just as an extra witness. So we can't be afraid of using tools at our discretion and thinking that that is automatically assuming the worst of people. It's actually it's a tool in our toolbox.
Well,
Um,
can I ask this? Like, one of the things that I'm kind of understanding, or one of the things that I'm getting out of this conversation, is not only when we're talking about being a keen observer, being a proactive observer of things, that we shouldn't only be looking for the red flags, we should be looking for the green flags as well, right? I was just thinking as you were talking about grandma got a flat tire. I had an experience when our kids were little where we had enrolled one of our children in karate. My wife dropped him off one day. I was to pick him up. I got delayed. And when I got to the dojo, nobody was left but the sensei and our son. But you know where he was? He was outside, standing next to our son, waiting for me to arrive. He was not indoors. He was not in a private place. And I think, again, green flag, he was protecting himself. He didn't want anybody
sure.
to believe that he might do something untoward in the 2.5 extra minutes that I was late beyond everybody else, right? So, I mean, that was a huge green flag to me. Like, this is a safe place. Our sensei is looking after our child. And, man, he was green flag after the other. But if you go into a cathedral and you see these First Communion kiddos doing their confessional in an open area that everybody can see, and they're each doing their confessional in a different place that everybody can see, huge green flag for you if you want to be a parishioner there, or if you're deciding whether or not to remain a parishioner in that place, right? Those are things that are observations that we should keep in mind.
Exactly. And one of the stories that really comes to light about religious settings is the the pastor, the preacher, the priest who takes a keen liking to a child in your family, and the the reverence that a family often feels. You know, we talked earlier about, well, how is a family groomed? Oftentimes, the family's own characteristics, culture, traditions can roll downhill to their children, obviously. So when the priest shows up and says, I am going to take you on a special camping trip just with you and your brother out into the woods. We're going to go to the mountains. We're going to hike all day, and we're going to sleep in a tent under the stars and explore nature together. If I'm the parent and this person has always been kind to my family, they've shown me nothing but respect, they're revered in the community, I'm probably going to encourage my child, if not tell my child, well, you're obviously going on this because this is a special opportunity. We talked last week about this idea that gifts within the favoritism
Hmm.
stage of growth, those things can feel like they can be money, they can be gifts, but they can also be experiences. So I've talked to many people who, with a faith background, who've had that experience where a person with a clerical, a clerical stance or identity has been able to single them out because it is such an honor. It is a promotion for that family to be selected for whether
Yeah.
it's individual time. You see what I'm getting at here.
Yeah. No, yeah. Wow. Okay.
Okay, so most of the time when we're talking about access, we're granting access at home. We've talked before about the idea that home is a high risk environment, so we need to keep our awareness up. Who's coming in and out of our house, and why are they there? You know, you talk very openly about friends, neighbors. You know, you like to host people. That's wonderful. But what is the purpose? Why are they here? What is to be expected of their time here? Are they here to drink and party? Are they here to do, religious study? Are they here to eat a meal? And just being really clear on that so that you have expectations and then you set the expectations for your child as well. If we go to the next slide, we're going to start to get into family members, which is a huge component of child sexual abuse. Most of the time, when we're thinking about this category, we're thinking about people who may live in town, may not live in town, may be visiting. But what are some of the unique components of family members? Can you think of one or two off the top of your head, Gavin?
Unique components to family members. Well, yeah, I mean, you're emotionally and physically close to one another. You behave differently with your family than you do with anyone else, even your best friends. Um,
What do you mean by that? How do you behave differently with family members?
well, you're way more open to the taboos of society with your family than you are with anyone else. That you would, things that you would do, um, with your family that you would never let anybody else see. We do a lot of touching in our homes. We hug our children, and um, in our family, like every night my kids are walking on me. They're walking on my back. They're walking on my ankles. I just absolutely, so there's just tons of touching, right?
Yeah.
Um, and actually that has been one of the things as our kids have grown, because I'm not sure if I shared this with you, but Kimberly and I, we have two batches of kids. We have our first three, then a big gap, then our second group of two. We call them the olders and the littles. And people think we're a blended family. No, we just waited 10 years in between number three and four. But the as the children have grown, you have to figure out, okay, at what point do we need to kind of pull back on the affection, make it appropriate for their age, make sure that they still understand that they are beloved children, but not do as much of the, you know, hug and kiss at night kind of stuff that we did when they were little. So anyway, I get that was a long-winded thing, but the I think there's a lot more touching in a family.
Yeah,
And I think there's a lot
I'm
more
really glad.
taboo in a family. Like it's a
Yeah,
taboo-free zone when nobody's looking.
yeah, and there are ground rules in your home that are, it's like a secret language. We've mentioned a few times with some of the other access roles, like they speak their own language. I'm
Yeah,
sure if there were to be a fly on the wall in your home or my home, they would realize there's a secret language in everybody's home, right?
that's
There are
true.
things that are normed, there are things that you guys do that are unique to who you are as a family. So you've already mentioned a couple of things. You have access to bedrooms and bathrooms, and there's sort of this coming and going philosophy in a house with family members. There's a sense that you don't have to put your guard up because we're all at home here. We can take our shoes off, let our hair down, all of those components. I think some important things to note here on this slide is that most families are not necessarily supervising their children the way that you might at a playground or the way that you might at a little league game, the same way when they're home,
Because
because
home is
there's this
safe.
sense that you're safe. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can be comfortable here, you can be safe here. um, if there's going to be substance use, typically that substance use is going to happen at home. You already mentioned that you and your family have made choices about substance use. Many individuals who use substances might use substances more leisurely and inside their homes. So that's a risk factor when we think about inebriation or the inebriation of other people who may be coming to our homes, when we think about keeping kids safe. Um, the idea of by proxy invites, right? This idea that like grandma's here and she brought XYZ,
Oh, yeah.
this your brother is home from college and he brought XYZ. So
Yeah.
there's this sense that our door is open, and if you're part of our family, then you can also decide to maybe bring it a plus one.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I was thinking about how in our home we do have guests frequently that stay, and they could be extended family members, they could be old friends. We have a and you can feel when a guest is in the house because you're like, okay, everybody mind your P's and Q's, everybody be on your best behavior. We've got guests. However, it quickly reverts back to you're just going to behave the way you're going to behave in your house. Like if they're there for a few days, it's different on day three than it was on day one, right? It
Great
very
point.
quickly
Great.
you can let your guard down. And in our home, we've had those experiences, and it's been beautiful. They've turned out really well. But where like our oldest daughter came home from college and she brought three of her friends and they stayed for a week during spring break. Or, you know, my little sister-in-law was in the Marine Corps down south and they needed to get out of the way of the hurricane. All of a sudden, we've got a bunch of Marines in our house, right? Heading
Yes.
north, getting out. So, yeah, we've had those experiences and it's been beautiful. They've turned out great. But I didn't consider that because I had like, well, it's like because Cassandra brought these three Marines to our house, it's like there are three extra Cassandras, not there are three strangers that could be could be predators looking for an opportunity. It never even
Yes.
crossed my mind.
Yes. 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 So if we go to the next slide, um, one of the things that I was specifically asked by your audience to address is the idea of single or dating or cohabitating parents. This is a growing issue, partly because we have a different relationship now with marriage and family building than we have at any other time that we have been raising families and using a marriage model. We have more and more kids who are born to single, unwed women. We have more and more people who are opting out of marriage and maybe opting into cohabitation and raising families without the construct of marriage. And that's an interesting lens by which to look at this issue, because we see, as we talked about before, we see an enormous jump in the risk for child sexual abuse for children who are living with a single dating or cohabitating parent. So let's talk a little bit about the risk factors of dating. And if you have any other ideas, Gavin, or your audience, please feel free to add in. I know this is not the entirety of the list. When we think about this issue, we think about unknown adults. By and large, these are individuals that you may have met through the wonderful advent of dating apps, where you might have seen their picture, you might know what they've posted about themselves, and suddenly they're coming over for time in your home. These are individuals who may be dating you, they may be commingling their own children with your children. So we have mixtures of different kids, different adults with different children who may otherwise be strangers to each other. This is
Mhm.
not altogether bad, but these are some risk factors that we need to consider. Also, I'm going to bring up substances again. During the dating process, it may be normed in your household or in your relationships to drink alcohol or use drugs. Those things might happen in the setting of your home. So that puts children at risk for their own safety if that's something that is part and parcel of your dating experience. These individuals may lower your threshold for vigilance or supervision or the strenuousness of parenting, because you're trying to present yourself as,
You were
you
dating.
know, cool and
Yeah.
attractive. The nagging dad or the nagging mom is not very attractive. So when we think about the innate risk factors, there is incredible intimacy between the two adults who are choosing to be in a relationship, and there is a by proxy intimacy for the child who's living in that setting. This is not always beneficial to the child. In no way am I saying that step families cannot be a wonderful, beautiful thing. There are myriads of examples of wonderful step parents, both stepmothers and stepfathers, but we cannot ignore that what research is showing us about children and their vulnerabilities is that when the parent is concerned with relationships, with their intimate lives, oftentimes one of the things to be collateral damage, as we talked about earlier, is the well being of the child.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes me wonder about, like, if you're in a new relationship, which I haven't been in 25 years, but you know, you're, what did Disney call it? You're Twitter pated, right? You're just not yourself. You're in this like foggy, it's delightful. It's amazing, right? Just foggy, full of rainbows and unicorns kind of version of yourself. And if that is the state that you're in, how is it that you're going to, and I'm not saying you're constantly in that state and you're floating above, I'm just talking in moments, right? You could, there could be things that you oversee or that you uh,
Overlook.
overlook. Thank you. Not oversee, that you overlook in your life, like your children, like the well-being of your children, like the safety of your children, because you're just in a happy kind of dating new relationship kind of state.
And let's explore the Stearns case a little bit, because you have a situation where the primary caregiver, biological mother, is interested in dating Stefan. Having that commitment, that relationship became so important that it was very important that Madeline and Stefan had a close bond. So you might even unintentionally, as a dating adult, a dating parent, you might be forcing intimacy, connection, cohabitation, intermingling private spaces with this other person, because you, as the adult, are seeking this connection and this relationship. and it's so critically important to you that this person get along, right? When I talk to dating parents, they'll say, "But I really wanted my child to befriend this person. I really wanted this relationship to work out, and I knew that my partner was my dating partner was going to have to learn who my child was and get close to my child." We can go on to the next slide if you'd like.
Yeah.
But this first component, intimacy and familiarity between the adults, does not extend to intimacy and trust between the adults and the children. That's so important for us to remember. Even though we get caught up in our own emotions, even though we get caught up in our own desires for intimate lives and connection and partnership, oftentimes children are at the mercy. There's no better way to say that. Children are at the mercy of whomever a single dating parent may
Yeah.
bring into.
Yep.
And they
Yep.
often have no agency. And if they were to speak up or say, "I really think it's weird that, he or she does XYZ," oftentimes that's met with, "You just don't want me to be happy. You just don't want me to be in love again. You just are disappointed because, mommy and I aren't together again, or daddy and I aren't still together." And you can understand both perspectives.
That's very interesting. Man, and I am not an expert on this whatsoever, having never studied it nor gone through it. But I can look back in my life to friends who came from unhealthy blended families, and I can kind of see what you're saying, right? That the parents worked, they wanted it to work so bad that they were willing to sacrifice the happiness of their children in order for that relationship to work. And it seems completely backwards for what you should be doing, right? You should be in that situation, at least, again, not an expert, but since you are in that situation, your number one priority should be the happiness of the child, not your own happiness, which is, I guess, way easier said than done. Like how
Yeah, and I think um, it's so critical because we look at certain cases, famous cases, popular cases, cases of the moment, um, and we think, how could that parent have done that? And what we failed to realize is that we don't educate parents about grooming, about predation, about the sweetness, the flattery, this idea that if you're a single parent with a child, that you are high risk for a predator to fall in love with you, to show you affection, to build intimacy with you in order for them to have access to your child, in order for them to be in your home, to have access to the private spaces and bedrooms and bathrooms that that child uses. We don't properly educate parents, and instead we sort of demonize the single parent who's saying, "Hey, but I would like a love life and I would like connection again." And I think we can do a far better job of having conversations like this and remembering that we could do a better job as a society to say what's in the best interest of kids and how can you have a love life, a connection, a partnership, and still protect your child from a potential predator who might only be dating you because you have minor children.
well, getting back to say Madeline Soda on this one, and this is a case that, oh my goodness, it just makes me just it makes me stir. I'm so angry at that entire situation. Um, Many of us feel that not only did Madeline's mother, uh, what am I trying to say? Many of us feel that Madeline's mother was an active participant in the abuse of her daughter. Now, I don't know that. We just look at what has happened and go, how is it even possible that a person could be ignorant to what was to this level of abuse that was happening over 5 years? And I did find an expert that talked about a particular sexual kink of mothers who really like giving their children to their lovers. It's something that is like a thing. So I mean, is this something where a predator like Stefan Stearns sees that this is the kind of gatekeeper that we have here, and the bait behind that gate is, I guess, um, is a good enough incentive to keep moving forward. But once he realizes that the gatekeeper is just very easy to manipulate and to bring to his side, I mean, is that part of the predation process?
I would say, in my experience, that predators just in the same way that they are available and keen observers at the vulnerabilities of a potential child, they're also highly attuned to the vulnerabilities of the adults who are the gatekeepers of those children. So I don't know the mental health background of Jennifer. I don't know her full biopsychosocial history, but I can bet you that she may have been more susceptible to a person like Stefan, and having demonstrated by staying in the relationship, even enduring the abuse that Madeline had to go through when she was smaller, and staying in the relationship indicated that there was a vulnerability there before Stefan showed up on the scene.
Hmm.
And when we talked earlier about the idea that children are at the mercy of whomever their parent chooses to date and whomever the parent chooses to bring into the home or their lives, this is a really clear example of that. This was not something that any child should ever have to endure.
Yeah.
And I am not going to speculate about whether or not Jennifer was a co abuser. What I can say is that many times that abuse is occurring inside the home, there is uh, there is an maybe an inability, an unwillingness, or an inability to see what is before you. And we know that Jennifer was financially dependent on
Yeah.
Stefan for a while. She's also dependent in his caregiving of Madeline so that she can go and work. Part of the
Yeah.
reason that she is, I mean, the whole situation is tragic, um, and it should illustrate for us that there are some clear no-go zones. And we'll get into that a little bit here when we're talking about this slide.
Yeah.
This
Go for it.
idea that an adult should ever be in a bed with a child is that is the go-to, right? There is no family member, there's no relative who needs to get into bed with your minor child. That was something that was completely uncalled for, and again, that's an understatement when we think about that tragic case and her loss of life. Because again, predators are going to accelerate and intensify their abuse, and oftentimes it can lead in death, as it did for poor Madeline.
Hmm.
Um, when we think about our risk reduction checklist for single or dating parents, obviously we have the option of waiting till our children are 18 or out of the house or fully adult before we start dating. For many people, that is the option they pick. I've talked to many women, especially. I've talked to many women who have said, I won't let a man in my house. I won't date a man until my children are fully grown. And it was one of the best decisions I made.
I,
I
I
understand. Yeah.
like I understand why a person wouldn't do that. But I do think that that is a terrific choice. I was, on the from the male perspective, if you lose your spouse or you're divorced or something like that, and you want that mother figure for your child, you, you could end up in a whole on Cinderella situation too, where you bring in somebody who's not going to love and care for the child that you want to do. And I mean, and these aren't just fairy tales. My it has happened in my own family. So yeah, the whole idea of waiting till your children are grown to then seek that romantic outlet, I think that's a noble thing. I think that is a very good way to do that.
So that's an option. That's on the table. Um, Keeping to the best of your ability your romantic life separate from your parenting life. And how would you do this? Well, you can date while the child is away with the other parent, or you can date while the person who's watching the child, maybe it's a grandparent or a relative or someone safe, so that you can go and have your intimacy and your connected time, but you know for a fact that your child is not being exposed to a new person, exposed to that person's other biological children, or their habits or norms. Because again, what do we learn about households and families? We have our own language. Inside
Yeah.
every one of our homes is our own language, and we're supposed to be able to feel safest in our homes. And when we bring someone in who the adult parent is dating, that shakes up the dynamic tremendously. I remember I had a client I worked with who abused his stepdaughter, and he would interrupt her in her walks from the bathroom to her bedroom after she showered. He knew her rituals, he knew her routines because he's in the house. He's married to the mother, so there's that semblance, that sense. Oh well, we're married now, so
We're a family.
you've got.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, that we're married now, we're a family. This is just the way families behave.
That's right. Some stepfathers come on the scene and they say, now you're going to call me daddy and you're going to treat me like this, and I'm going to be able to come in your room whenever I want to, or you're going to kiss me goodnight, whatever that little thing might be, right?
My house, my
And it's
rules
not,
kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's a silly example, but when you look in the animal kingdom, when a male dies in, let's bring up lions for example. In the lion community, when a male dies and the female takes on a new male partner, do you know what he does to the cubs of the
He
previous
he
male?
kills them, does he not? Doesn't he kill them?
Kills them. He kills them. So in a way, when we think about themes of power and control and abuse, in a way, my power over you, my ability to abuse you and to have potentially no consequence because the person who I'm dating, person who I may be married to, they worked hard to fall in love with me, to be with me. They're certainly not going to upend this relationship because of an accusation. I've even heard cases from survivors where they've gone to their parent and said, your new boyfriend is doing this, or your new husband is doing this, your new spouse, your new partner is doing this to me. And the person turning around and saying, you're just making this up. I'm finally happy. I'm finally in a relationship that I'm pleased with, and you have to undermine my well-being, my love, my relationship. So it's extraordinarily complex. There's a lot of gray area in these subjects, and in
Yeah.
no way am I trying to sweep a broad brush to say, it's all black or white. But I think it's very important that if you're coming from a family with a single dating parent, or you have a family member who's a single dating parent, that you have this kind of conversation and you evaluate what are the risks and how can I date in a world where everyone's encouraged to get on other dating apps and swipe right and meet up and hook up.
Hmm.
How can I make sure that the safety and well-being of my child and myself is intact?
And I think that line down at the bottom, minors living with a single dating parent are 15 to 20 times more likely to be victims of child sex abuse. And actually, we kind of skipped over the beginning. Preserve healthy marriage to prevent separation for children if possible. Obviously, that's not always possible, right?
No,
So,
no,
yeah.
it's not always possible, but when we think about the power of health, I'm talking about healthy marriages, so are you.
Hmm.
This idea that that we're not dealing with abuse, we're not dealing with addiction, we're not dealing with chronic adultery or something like that. Just that safety and security of stability that is established when two people choose to vet the person, date for a while, and then commit themselves to being married. That is the safest bet based on research. It could be that we're learning more as this cohabitation and cohabitating and parenting outside of wedlock. Maybe
Which
the
is
research is
rather
wrong.
new. I mean, it is rather new. It's
It
since the
is,
about
yes.
70s, probably, right? So we're only talking about 50 years of data so far. It's pretty new.
Exactly. So we have to be open to the fact that one of the best tools in our toolbox is to teach children about grooming, because we have no idea who might be coming into their lives, into their environments, and we get to, just like we get to grant, limit, or revoke access to our family and our children, we also have the ability and the authority to teach our children about grooming, whatever part of this conversation that resonates with you and your family. Take that and translate that in age appropriate ways to your child, because you'd be surprised at how much children know about this issue, about this topic, and maybe just bringing it into light will help support the well being of your family in general.
Yeah.
So, our takeaways from today's lesson: predators are going to go out of their way to find and secure volunteer jobs, recreational jobs, paying jobs, so that they can find and have access to children and families. We have an obligation, a mandate, in my opinion, to talk to our kids about grooming. And we also need to remind our children that we are the cornerstone. They can always talk to us, no matter who it's about, no matter if I love that person, no matter if I'm the one responsible for bringing that person into their lives or into their home life, they can always talk to us.
Terrific. So next time
So,
we're going to be
yeah.
talking about space, right? So far we've talked about grooming. Tonight we talked about access. So next Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be talking about space. Can you give us a little preview of what that is?
Yeah, so one of the enormous spaces that we have to think about when it comes to predation is online. We need to talk in depth about gaming platforms. We need to talk in depth about social media platforms and devices. The average age of receiving your first smartphone in this country is age 10. And most children by the age of 10 have already been exposed to graphic pornography, which usually happens in this country somewhere between ages 7 and 9.
Are you
And
kidding me?
mm-mm. Predators know that kids are online. They know that they're spending on average 9 hours of screen time. When we think about exploitation, sexual exploitation, that is typically happening after 10 p.m. So when I talk to families or parents, I say just limiting the hours of when that child has access to their smart device or their social media, etc. Just turning off the internet, taking away that device after 9:30, 10 o'clock, will help decrease the likelihood that they could be victimized. These
Wow.
small tweaks, right? Because I'm in the soup with you guys. I'm trying to raise my family as well. And we're going to have to do a collective job to stop predation in its tracks and keep our kids safe while they partner with us for their own safety and well being. So these are some of the questions that I'll be answering. And I'm always open to additional questions or themes that you all want to address, and you can contact me via any of those methods as well.
Okay, real quick, there are a couple questions I want to get in before we go on.
Great.
One of them was, what has shifted in our society that, well, it doesn't say what it was. It says, what has shifted in our society that this seems normal lately? I just don't get it. I can't remember what they were talking about there. Let me move on. Can you break down possible changes you see in children by age range as they are being groomed, especially maybe with older teenagers?
Yeah, really interesting. So, when we're thinking about this concept, the majority of kids who are sexually abused actually fall in the 12 to 17 range. When we see children who are sexually abused ages 6 and under, it's normally done by a female predator. Do you know why that
Mm,
might be?
I don't know. No idea.
So, who would you normally entrust to watch a child 6 and under?
Yeah, it'd be a girl usually,
Yeah, it'd be a
a
young
woman.
woman, it would be a woman, it would
Your
be an older
babysitter's going to be
woman.
a girl. You're gonna, yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. When we're thinking about this high category, this high age range, this 12 to 17 years old, a few things are going on which make them at increased risk. They're going through puberty, so their bodies are changing, their hormones are changing. They are also developmentally taking on more risk. They are spending less time at home in the care When you think about a 7-year old, for example, they're probably waking up in the morning, going to school, being picked up, and coming home. When you think
Yeah.
about 14, 15, 16-year old, they may be engaging in sports, they might be going out with friends, they might be walking to the local store with a group of friends after school.
Yeah.
There's also a high likelihood that those individuals have smart devices. So when we think about those access points for 12 to 17-year olds, we definitely see a high correlation of predation with that age range. Now, I think that you still have a tremendous amount of influence as a parent. They can't turn their ears off. They might be able to plug their ears, but
I feel like teenagers can turn their brains off, but that might just be me.
I've had that experience as well in my own household. But I think what is something that I find really useful and helpful when dealing with the age breakdown and risk factors are making mock scenarios. So pretending, like I do with my younger children, we can pretend a scenario like, oh, your teacher wants to give you a kiss on the face or a kiss on the mouth at school. Oh, mom, that's so weird. A teacher shouldn't kiss you on the face or kiss you on the mouth. Okay, great. So if anything ever happens like that, if it's strange behavior, remember that's really our focus. Our focus is not on stranger danger, it's really on strange behavior. And letting them have that experience of walking through a potential circumstance with us and guiding us. We can do the same thing all the way up through into adulthood. So, thinking in terms of, well, what happens if your coach DMs you, direct messages you on your cell phone to ask for a picture of you in your cheerleading costume? Well, what would you do? How would you handle that situation? The other thing you can do with these older kids, because typically they're being exposed to other children or exposed to information online, is use current examples. Use a case from your local area. Use a case that's in the news. Obviously considering your own child, their maturation, their development itself, but we cannot forego the power and the authority that we have in our own household. And whenever possible, not only are we observing their behavior, their output when they're in the environment of their lives, but we also have to observe them at home. So if you come into your home environment, your child goes away off to their own space, you go away off into your own space, and that's how the evening ends, you're going to limit yourself in your ability to observe rhythms or patterns of behavior. So as we talked about on Monday, if any behavior comes up that is sudden change in dress, sudden change in hygiene, sudden change in performance or interest level, any regressive behaviors, thumb sucking, bedwetting, I need the light on at night, can't sleep alone, need to have my stuffy close by, these things, then that's your time to tune in and say, I'm really curious because I notice, list whatever you notice, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about this because yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you got to that. What I was wondering as you were talking about that, I mean, it does seem like you're not going to be able to make those observations unless you are doing things with your children in your home. So I would imagine having dinner together is still a very good idea. Having some sort of ritual at night for, family to get together. Like Kimberly and I, we do scripture and prayers with the kids. It's like 30 seconds of reading a scripture, and then as a family we say a prayer. But what ends up happening is we come together. It ends up being like 20 minutes together where we're talking about our day, or somebody's getting their teeth brushed, so we have to wait for them, and it ends up, or we always have animals in our home, so we're playing with the birds, or we're playing with the rabbits, or whatever. um, that little ritual, it doesn't have to be scripture and prayers, it doesn't have to be religious at all, but that ritual that we have together is a time that we have together. And so I would imagine that you would be a proponent of dinner time. We call it forced family time, those kinds of things where you can actually be a keen observer of your children looking for those sudden changes.
Absolutely. I'm not sure if I fully answered the question. So if I didn't answer your question, you can certainly write it in again. And I go into more detail on that in the book, especially because most parents are not trained in mental health, and this is still really useful information. But in regards to what you said, Gavin, what it's called in our house is a household meeting.
Mm,
So everybody has to be present. It's usually, at least one day a week. Sometimes we'll have an emergency house meeting if we need to. We start off with compliments. So
hmm
everybody has to give at least one person a compliment. So that could be, thank you, brother, for putting the seat down on the toilet. It could be something big like, thank you for giving me a ride to my practice. It could be, thank you for a really nice dinner. Thank you for buying me tickets to go see that movie with my friends. So we start the tone in a really positive way. And everybody has the opportunity to bring up things that are coming up for them that week, logistical things like, oh, please remember that, I have this project, so don't touch whatever's on the dining room table, right? It could be
yeah.
something silly. Remember, I've got 5 kids, so everything
Yep.
is chaos. Um, and then at the end, we have an opportunity to sort of, what do you need? What is it you're seeking? Do you need advice about something? Do you need counsel about something? Do you need reinforcement or sort of a pep talk, right? And we always talk about the fact that inside our house is the time to be, vulnerable and to ask for help. And these are things that are core values to who we are as a family, that we don't try to just stifle our needs. We do try to ask for help in what we need. We don't subvert it, or we don't use passive aggressive methods like throwing a tantrum or,
Right.
uh, yelling, screaming at the top of our lungs or something, but we use our language. And when we start doing this with the kids, especially if you start at a young age, you could really start this at any age. But when it's begun at an early age, we notice that there is a sense of communication that is just built in, whether it's because I have a need or because something I'm really struggling with this situation. And because they have older siblings, they have an untapped amount of wisdom, not only in my spouse and I, but they have an untapped amount of wisdom in their siblings. So it also interjects leadership opportunities for the other children to say, I've dealt with that before. Something I used was XYZ. So it gets us a little bit group therapy
Yeah.
ish, um, but that's a
No,
framework that has
but
worked for me.
children thrive under that. You'd think that, like in my family growing up, same thing with Kimberly. On Monday night, it was just family night. Don't schedule anything. There's nothing more important that you can be doing on Monday night than being at home as a family. And then it was usually something like we rented a VHS movie, we popped popcorn, we watched a movie together, we roasted marshmallows out in the backyard, we went to the park and threw water balloons at one another. There was always something cheap, played wiffle ball, but it was always something as a family. Our parents did that. And children thrive on that sort of stuff. Our oldest child is 24 years old. Our second oldest child is 23. When I talk about our scripture and prayer at night, the kids love getting together, whether they're a 10-year-old or a 23-year-old. They thrive in it. And what you're describing is your family meetings. Children love this stuff. I loved it as a kid. And we talk about forced family time. Sometimes Kimberly will just make a proclamation. She'll stand at the bottom of the stairs and just say, forced family time. Everybody come here right now. And I, I have to admit that it used to drive me crazy. Like, I've got to report, I've got to do this for a client or whatever. No, forced family time. These days, it's frequent that our children will ask for forced family time. They'll
Aww.
ask for it. We need forced family time right now. Like, okay, I'll go to the bottom of the stairs, call up everybody, forced family time. And so I guess what I'm saying is it sounds cheesy. It sounds like it's this campy old style way of talking to children, but it is not. It is under these kinds of constructs that we've been talking about, children love it and they thrive. And when they grow up and they're old men like me, you look back on it and you think about your happiest memories were watching my mom try to skateboard for the first time on a Monday night when we had family time, right? There's just so many of those memories. So I'm really glad that you brought up how you guys do it in your family. That's terrific. Let's see a couple more
And
questions.
remember,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just going to interject that remember that predators know that one really keen way to get a child is to make them feel special. And it's so upsetting to me that for many children living in this country, the last place they would go to feel special is inside their home with their caregivers. We do not have family meals in the same way that we used to. There is not that embedded culture of family cohesiveness. And one thing you can do today is try to think about what would make your child feel special. And if you don't know what that is, start a conversation with your child and say, I really want to let you know and make you feel as special as I think you are. What are some ways I can do that? Within reason, not buying you a
Sure.
car or things like
Yeah.
that. But I think it's so important that what predators use against parents is parents' distractibility, parents' inability to really hone in on what makes their child special and convey to their child that specialness.
That is sad, the whole idea that you don't feel special in your own home, and therefore that gives a predator leverage, right? Making them feel special maybe for the first time, when what should happen is, I mean, I'm not saying that you should make your child feel like they are the center of your universe, but they should feel loved, they should feel cared for, they should feel special. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't have to keep going on that. I do have to think about one more thing about this. When Kimberly and I started dating, her parents had pretty recently purchased a jet ski. And I was like, sweet, I'm dating a girl with a jet ski and I have a truck with a hitch on it. Let's go jet skiing. But her parents' rule was, if anyone wants to take out the jet ski, everyone is invited. That was their, so it became like they had this shiny beacon of a toy that made it so that everybody wanted to spend time with the family. So if I picked up Kimberly in my truck and said, let's go jet skiing, that meant that all of her brothers and sisters and her parents were invited too. And I don't know, that's, I mean, you don't, that's kind of a, that's a very special thing, right? Like not everybody's going to have a jet ski. We certainly haven't in our life had those kinds of toys, but in our family room, we have a long dining room table. Again, we live in an old historic house, so there's this big dining room. It's kind of Batman, and can you pass the salt kind of a room, right? Big long table,
Awesome.
and we have. Have you ever seen Pop Darts? It's this little game where you throw these suction cup darts and try to stick them on
Oh
things.
yeah, I think I've seen that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a blast. But it's if you can hear it throughout the whole house. Oh, somebody's playing Pop Darts. Everybody's invited, right? Go down and play. So
Nice,
anyway,
nice.
that's something my in-laws did, which was awesome. Um, Another question was, are there signs to look for early on in life that someone may become a predator so that we can be proactive and help them before anyone gets hurt?
That's a great question. So there's an organization called stopitnow.org, which offers intervention counseling. It's based out of the UK, but I do think more and more agencies like that are going to pop up because we do see a high rise in predation from older kids onto other minors. Things and signs, what research tells us is that most sexual predators have a high ACE score. So, as we talked about last week, the idea of adverse childhood events. So, what are those? Death of a parent, incarceration of a parent, domestic violence, sexual violence, substance abuse or dependence, filing for bankruptcy, separation or divorce. These are some of the examples of what ACEs are. In the population of convicted sex offenders that I counseled, many of them had domestic violence growing up that they witnessed between their caregivers. They may have had a distorted relationship with intimacy, or intimacy that was modeled to them was what you and I would think of as distorted or unusual or strange.
Hmm.
They weren't necessarily sexually abused as children, but there was strange domesticity energy around. One of the things that we need to be paying attention to when it comes to observing kids in their environments is their access to pornography. We know that children who, and adults in fact, who watch pornography more and more likely to be geared towards younger and younger and
Hmm.
um, more fringe material. So there have been some individuals who end up in criminal situations because the algorithm is pointing them to younger and younger material. So we need to be paying attention to what our children are watching. Are they gaining access to pornography? If so, how are we having a conversation about that? There's a wonderful book called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. There's a youth edition, and then there's a more adolescent version of that book. That's a wonderful resource if you don't already have it. That could be in your arsenal of tools. Again, this is about making sure that we have a broad umbrella of support and love within the household. We're also watching for inappropriate behaviors, whether it's touching or gazing or watching or peeping. When we think about those terms, we need to be aware of siblings as a very high risk category.
Oh,
We did not get into it in grave detail. Obviously, we talked about family members. Sibling sexual abuse is one of the most rampant, unreported crimes that happens inside households and inside family
yeah.
systems. We can obviously explore the risk factors for that, commingling, maybe sharing a room, obviously sharing a house, the idea that you're probably not going to eject a child out of the family system if they act out against a child. But if you notice, like, oh, they're really handsy with the neighborhood kids, or they're always wrestling and tickling and touching, it's time to probably go back to the drawing board about what are the rules that we've taught them. Again, think about earlier in this conversation how I mentioned that our rules are about who we are, they're not about who the other person is. So, what are your rules about
Oh, I lost you.
youth?
Oh, there you are. You there? Well, I just want to make sure that we get a chance for her to come back because that was an important part of the conversation. Are you back?
Oh,
Oh, you're back. There you go.
oh, sorry about that.
No, that's
There's a
okay. So
storm outside, so it's
you're talking about
messing with
rules.
me.
There are the rules are about us, not about them, and then you cut off.
Right. So thinking in terms of going back to the drawing board with what have we taught you about body safety, your siblings' body safety? Just because you can, play with kids in the pool doesn't mean that you're reaching towards the bottom of a child's body, or when you notice that a child is maybe holding a kid in a way that is in their intimate parts, or spreading their fingers rather than cupping their hands. It seems like a silly, stupid example, but these are the types of things that if a child is going on the wrong path, you can revert to core basics. What I need you to know is that you cannot touch a person in these different places for this reason. Do you understand? All right, I'm going to be observing you next time you're on the playground, in the pool, etc., so that you are the home base. And if you notice that a child's behavior is unchanged, then I would suggest getting support from your pediatrician, any other professional, in order to help support your mission to re educate that child about what's acceptable and appropriate behavior.
I was going to ask you. There's one more question here. There are a couple. Let's see. People tend to. Oh, yeah, I think that we've covered that one. But before I do the last one, since you brought it up, I wanted to ask about pornography. It does seem, and I don't know that this is true, this is probably anecdotal at best, but it does seem that the pornography that our kids get exposed to and that is available for people to watch is way more than just nudity. It's like rapey. It's violent and not it's abnormal and abstract. Right? So how has if that is true, I mean, that's my observation, but if that observation is true, how does that how does that change the effect on those that look at pornography as opposed to earlier generations where pornography could have been a photo or a drawing or something like that, but it wasn't typically violent? How does that change the kids that are seeing that. If you're talking about kids that are 7, 8 years old that are being exposed to this, I mean, what does that do to them?
Yeah, I write about this in the book. I think the pornification of childhood is really alarming. You're absolutely right that research shows that the majority of scenes are violent and oppressive in a multitude of ways, but we've now normalized things like strangulation, choking. It is
Slapping.
it's extremely unsettling to imagine that what children are being given via algorithms or through search engines is the farthest thing from healthy consensual sex between two adults.
Hmm.
I'm the first one to say I want my children to grow and develop into healthy adults so that they can have a healthy, intimate life. Um, the path to that is not the pornography of today. I understand being curious. However, it's extremely distorting for young, essentially males. That seems to be the highest use group for
Yeah.
modern pornography. It's creating, in some cases, erectile dysfunction in our young people because they do not understand how to interact with real life human beings, and this is of grave concern for me raising my own children, and hopefully for us as a society at large. We're starting to see some legislation that is helping that. We have Pornhub, which is one of the largest free resources for pornography in this country, that has now, next month, I believe, we'll have to age verify. So up until this point, you just had to click a button that said you were 18.
Yeah, I'm
Gavin, I
old
don't know.
enough. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but my 7-year-old is probably smart enough to know. Oh, I click that button and press enter, and I'm greeted into a whole different netherworld.
Yeah.
So we have to be good gatekeepers. We also have to be courageous and brave, and we have to bring it up with our kids. And it's the last thing I want to talk about with my kids. I'm sure it's the last thing you want to talk about with your kids, but we are no longer just moving a Playboy magazine from one house to the other. We have a serious situation in 4D that is creating havoc on the lives and the development of a healthy sexual relationship. And research is also indicating that young females are going to pornography in order to learn what is to be expected in the bedroom when
Oh,
they enter relationships. So we have a across the board problem when it comes to pornography. This is not coming from some moral vigilante stance. This is really coming from a stance of we need to embed healthy rituals around the sacredness and the specialness about sexuality between two consenting adults. And pornography does the exact opposite of that. It really it cheapens, more than cheapens, the experience. And I feel as if more and more parents need to be having this conversation, because I would rather start the conversation than have my child already be taking steps into a
yeah.
space that is harmful for them. And I want them to be able to find a person. And I want my daughters to know that hitting, slapping, choking, strangulation is not part of a healthy, consenting adult intimate relationship. And obviously, we can put all the other sort of tertiary categories of lust and other things aside for the moment. But what I think is critically important is that we everything we've talked about tonight and what we will continue to talk about next week is about scaffolding. It's about saying, when you're in the doctor's office, your body still belongs to you. When you're in your religious environment, that does not give that person the authority to touch you or sexualize you or exploit you. The same is true when we think about being online. We now have a generation of kids who are being raised alongside AI. And we have a growing problem of deep fake pornographic material
Hmm.
that's being created even by youth. So these are young children who are crafting and creating AI generated pornographic material. And
Yeah.
honestly, legislation is moving at a snail's pace to what technology is doing. And unfortunately, you and I and all your listeners are the ones who are on the front lines of having to put up gates to a tsunami of content.
Wow. Yeah, that's yeah, I think that we could talk about just the problem of pornography for hours and hours and hours. Yeah. Okay, last question for the night. Man, we've been at it 2.5 hours here. Uh, how do you report someone who had law enforcement or somebody who is a member of law enforcement and can deprive you of your rights? What if your abuser is a member of law enforcement? I hadn't even thought of that
This
question.
Yep, this is a really, really interesting subject matter and access role when we think about this. I've
Because,
actually,
as I understand it,
yeah,
domestic violence is at a much higher rate in households where a member of that household is a law enforcement officer. So, I mean,
I don't know the research on that, but that is very curious to me.
yeah, well, yeah, I don't know the research on it either. I've just heard that so many times. So I
Yeah.
probably shouldn't state it as fact, but yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating, especially when we give, throughout this conversation, we've designated certain people as trustworthy, or we've designated certain people as experts, or we've designated people as safe. And I think when we think about law enforcement, the enormous boulder is that the system by which you should be reporting to, if it's tied to that individual, those peers of that person are probably not necessarily going to believe you. They're not necessarily going to want to rat out one of their own.
hmm
There's a real brotherhood, there's a fraternity,
it's
if you will,
fraternity. Yep.
of individuals who are police officers, firefighters, those serving professions who we lean on, and we know that most of them are not predators, and we rely on them heavily, and we are thankful for their service. But when you have a predatory law enforcement individual, you must work even harder to report that person, to go above and beyond their head, to go to the supervisors, to be a really, really noisy, squeaky wheel about what you've experienced. I always think it's important to document. I always encourage families who are dealing with grooming situations to document whatever has happened. I know there are efforts underway to try and move legislation so that police officers who are caught grooming or sexually abusing minors are charged with higher crimes than, it just being considered a misdemeanor, for example, because they have taken a position of authority and
Yeah.
abused that position, similar to how you would if you were a teacher who's abused a child. We give these individuals, they earn their badges, but if their behavior falls into abusive or exploitative, we must respond through reporting and action, even if it means possibly contacting the media and doing whatever you can to pour as much gasoline on that situation as possible.
Yeah, and I sympathize with somebody who might be in that position because that talk about a scary thing. I mean, this doesn't perfectly. This isn't a perfect comparison, but I can't tell you as a reporter in my day job when people want to report on something going wrong in the community. The vast majority of them want to do it off the record because they're afraid of retribution. And I mean, I heard that twice today. I'll hear it again tomorrow. It happens all the time. And I mean, that fear of having that retaliation or that retribution from somebody who has he or she has been empowered beyond what the rest of us have been empowered to do. Man, the fear that would have you would be, I would say that would be pretty overwhelming. So you're right. It has to have a spotlight on it. Go to the media, record, get evidence and go to the media.
This question is reminding me of a case that came out of a police department. I forget what state it's in. Maybe you'll remember this case. the police department hosted a youth recruitment program. Do you remember
This
this case?
this is in Massachusetts. This is going on right
Massachusetts.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, they
I'm
had they had
blanking on
young
her name.
people
Give me a
who
second.
wanted to become police officers. I'll just give the crib notes, and if I'm missing something, please fill it in. But the police officers were recruiting kids who wanted to become police officers, and there were at least two predatory police officers who were running the program, abusing children, grooming them and abusing them, and it resulted in a death of a woman who was like a young adult, and it was framed as a suicide, even though he was the one who murdered her. Is that correct,
That is
Gavin?
correct, and I'm blanking on her name right now. No, this is the same place that the whole Karen Reed thing happened. This is all in Canton. This is somebody tell me what her name is. Sandra Birchmore. Thank you very much. This is Sandra Birchmore. And
So I'm sure countless other children were abused and groomed in that setup. But because it was the police department, because these police officers were going out of their way to show these kids how, how to do their job, and, offering mentorship, it just completely went unseen, and it led to a tragic end for this young woman.
oh, it led to
And
her murder. In order to
yeah.
cover it up, they murdered her. So,
Mhm.
yeah, the danger is real. This question is a very good question about a very real thing. And good on you for remembering the Sandra Birchmore case. And thanks, Cindy and Debbie and Autumn, for reminding me the name of that case. That's a case that we've covered here. And you're right. She talk about grooming. She wanted to be a police officer. She goes into the whole Explorer program, and they bring her along for years and years and years. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That
Yeah.
is even more egregious just because they're a police officer. They're supposed to be on that pedestal. They're a service to us. And in that case it wasn't just one, it was multiples. So
It
and
never is.
it never is. And a lawyer that I've had on the show a couple times, in down in Kentucky. I'm blanking on names right now. Ned Pillersdorf. There we go. There's a lawyer I know down in Kentucky. His name's Ned Pillersdorf. He is representing a woman and the estate of a woman who is suing a sheriff's office for basically essaying uh, some victims down there. He's fond of saying, if there's one, there's 100. If there's two, there's 200. Right? Like I don't. He would say, I know about three. That means there are at least 300 cases.
Hmm.
So that's
One of one of the things I also think is an important change in our culture is that, as a direct result of school shootings, we have more and more police officers who are being placed in school
in
settings.
schools.
So when you think about access, it used to be that police officers, outside of this example with the Explorers program, police officers really didn't interact. I mean, they may host like a welcome party or a beginning of school, back to school kind of party or something in a community.
Yeah,
But
or
by and
like
large,
a
police
career day.
officers,
They might be in school for career day or
yes,
something like that.
yes. But now that we have a fear, a built-in fear about school shootings, many jurisdictions, many school districts have hired police officers to be in elementary, middle, and high schools.
Yeah.
So what does this do? Let's think about our theme from tonight, access. So if you're standing around a campus where maybe there's a threat, maybe there's not, you're watching the kids, maybe you're interacting with the kids, maybe you've got access to sending them a picture, requesting a picture. These relationships get built if you're at the same school for months on end or years on end. So that is one way in which our relationship with youth and law enforcement has grown tremendously because we have access through their surveillance within school systems during the school day.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I'm a big fan of the book Freakonomics, which is the study of the unintended consequences of things, right? Talk about, I mean, what an amazing observation. You're right. I mean, if you're a police officer, talking about the four F's, the fear that a police officer could put into a victim, you know, oh my goodness. Wow. Well, thanks for coming on, dude. When we
Yep.
started, we're like, we went pretty long last time. It was like an hour and 42. We're at 2 hours and 38 right now.
Oh my gosh.
But I've enjoyed it, and I'm really glad that you're willing to do this. You're willing to spend the time with us. I really hope that more people watch this kind of content. I know that YouTube doesn't put it out there because they just don't like us talking about things like this. And you know what? I think that their reasons are good reasons. They don't want children to come across very adult themes, and I get that. But man, I'm glad that we can have this opportunity on my channel to learn something new and be
Yeah, thank you
proactive.
so much. And thank you to your audience for sticking with us and taking what we talked about tonight and starting a conversation. Start a conversation in your house, start a conversation with your neighbor, your sister, your friend. These should not be taboo subjects. And the more we talk about child sex abuse and risk factors, the more that we can do something about it.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for being on here. Give me just 1 second. Stick around for just a second. Hey, guys, thank you so much. Crime and Consequence says this has been amazing. Anna is such a great and informative guest. Can't wait for her third appearance. That appearance will be next Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern as we get into the space of the predators run on gas, right? GAS, grooming, access, and space. We're going to get into that next week. I'm so grateful that she spent some time with us. I will not belabor this. We've been going an hour longer than we did last time, but it has been just enlightening and fascinating for me. I hope it has been that way for you too. Tomorrow we'll be back at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, our normal time. There's been a lot going on in the realm of true crime, and I can't wait to spend a little time with you tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Until then, I bid you adieu, and I will see you the next time. Take care. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.